Some people notice the sparkle of a watch, the size of a bank account, or how many followers you have online. But the ones who truly pay attention, they notice silence, the way someone walks into a room and doesn't need to speak, the way their eyes scan everything without looking obvious. Most would have walked past the man in the hoodie, sitting on a bench just outside a quiet federal building, thinking he was just another face in the city crowd. But if they looked closer, really looked, they'd have seen it. That sharp stillness. That weight of someone who's seen more than he'll ever say. Jason Statham sat quietly, elbows on knees, hoodie up, watching the entrance to the Department of Veterans Services. He hadn't come here for paperwork. He wasn't applying for anything. He didn't need to. But someone had left a note under his motorcycle seat 2 nights ago. One line. D-Block Janitor knows something. Ask no questions. Jason didn't recognize the handwriting, but that didn't matter. It was the wording that hit different. Because D-Block was a term never used outside black-level units, not officially, not even in code. Whoever wrote it wasn't guessing. Now he waited. The building was mostly glass and concrete, quiet this time of morning. A few early arrivals shuffled through the double doors. A delivery guy. A secretary in a long coat, nothing unusual. Then Jason saw him, pushing a trash bin on wheels, worn boots, blue jumpsuit faded from sun, white hair tucked under a beanie, maybe mid-60s. The kind of man no one ever talks to unless something spills. Jason stood slowly, adjusted his sleeves, and followed. Inside, the air smelled of pine cleaner and bureaucracy. A security guard waved Jason through without question, muscle memory from years of obeying suits that walked like command. Down the first corridor, Jason kept a steady pace. The janitor turned a corner toward a staff-only hallway. Jason moved faster, slipping past an open supply door and into the hallway without drawing attention. The janitor paused beside a utility closet, started unlocking it. Jason stepped closer. "Morning," he said casually. The janitor turned, blinked once, then smiled. "Didn't hear you behind me. These old ears only catch the wind nowadays." Jason offered a nod. "Name's Rob," the man chuckled. "I'm Hank. Been mopping these floors since before your generation could spell veteran." Jason scanned the hallway. Empty. Just flickering lights and silence. "You ever find things people leave behind? Paperwork, notes?" Hank gave a sideways look. "You asking if I snoop?" Jason shook his head. "Asking if anything ever felt off." Hank leaned on the mop. His voice dropped slightly. "There was a file, just last week. No label, tucked into a vent grate behind the comms panel in D-Block. Thought it was a mistake, turned it in." Jason's eyes narrowed. "Who did you give it to?" Didn't recognize him. Said he was from Internal Affairs. No badge, just that flat voice and mirrored glasses. Jason's stomach tensed. Mirrored glasses. That wasn't internal, that was Echo Division. The kind of people who erased history for a living. Jason kept his voice level. "What did the file say?" Hank looked away like remembering hurt. Had a picture. Looked like a desert. Tense. Names crossed out in red ink. One name wasn't. Jason stepped closer. "Which name?" Hank hesitated, then whispered it. "Statham." Jason froze. No one should have had access to those files. They were buried years ago under 6 layers of clearance. Someone was digging and trying to make it look like a coincidence. Hank rubbed the back of his neck. "I thought maybe I'd done the wrong thing. That's why I left the note under your bike." Jason's eyes sharpened. "You left it?" Hank nodded. "Didn't think it'd matter. Figured maybe it'd get to the right eyes." Jason looked at him, really looked. This wasn't just an old man cleaning floors. This was someone who still remembered what loyalty meant. Before Jason could reply, a loud beep echoed down the hallway. Security override, followed by a voice over the PA system. "Code 17. D-Block. All staff please return to primary zone." "Repeat code 17. Hank's eyes widened. "That's not a drill." Jason turned toward the hallway. "You need to leave, now." Hank didn't move. "You think I'm walking away after lighting the fuse?" Jason shook his head. "You lit it, let me carry it." Then he was gone into the hallway, back toward D-Block, each step faster than the last. D-Block wasn't a department. It was a vault, a storage wing below the main offices. It held sealed documents, off-site backup drives, and 3 biometric safes that had no digital network connection. Only people with physical clearance could even open the doors. Jason had seen rooms like it before, but this one was different. It didn't protect secrets, it baited them. As he reached the door, 2 men were already waiting. Black suits, Mirrored glasses, they didn't speak. Jason didn't slow. One moved. Jason ducked, pivoted, and slammed the first man's face into the wall. The second drew a stun wand. Jason caught the arm mid-swing, twisted hard, and dropped him with one strike to the throat. Both were down in seconds. Jason keyed the door. It buzzed. Access denied. He reached for the retinal override pad, but then something flashed behind him. Jason spun just in time to see a third man raise a device. Too late. The flash triggered a sonic pulse. Jason staggered, vision blurred. He dropped to one knee. Then, darkness. He woke in a concrete room. No windows. Just a cold table and the faint smell of bleach. His head throbbed. Across from him sat a man in a suit, calm, clean, and somehow not out of breath. "Mr. Statham," the man said, "you've become very curious." Jason didn't answer. The man continued. "D-Block wasn't just storage, it was a mirror. We placed files we wanted certain minds to find. You took the bait." Jason's jaw clenched. "Sarah Holt," the man nodded. "Still alive, still inside, but not for long." Jason leaned forward. "What do you want from me?" The man smiled faintly. "We want you to remember who you were, and why they feared you." Then he pressed a button, and the wall behind him lit up with a file. Jason's military record, only it wasn't his. It was rewritten, labeled, Subject 9A Prototype Control Asset. Jason stood. But before he could speak, the power flickered. Then went out silence, dark, and then a small emergency light clicked on. The door opened, and standing there was Hank holding a crowbar. "Hope I'm not too late," he said. Jason blinked once, then smiled. Not many people would have come back, but Hank wasn't many people. The hallway stretched out like a memory, flickering with emergency lights and pulsing with the faint hum of a broken alarm system. Jason Statham stood in front of the open doorway, a crowbar-wielding janitor at his side, and the heavy weight of his own identity spinning through his mind. "Come on," Hank said, gripping the crowbar tight, the veins in his hand taut with adrenaline. Jason stepped out of the holding room, eyes sharp, ears tuned for movement. He could already hear boots in the distance. Reinforcements were coming. This building was no longer a federal archive. It was a theater, and someone had just raised the curtain. They moved fast, cutting through back corridors Hank remembered from years ago. Maintenance shafts, hidden access doors, places no cameras ever looked, the kind of spaces only janitors knew by heart. Jason glanced at Hank. "Why'd you come back?" Hank kept his eyes forward. "Didn't like how it ended. Felt wrong. And sometimes a man just knows when something he thought was dead isn't." Jason nodded once. That answer was enough. They reached a sealed maintenance tunnel. Hank pulled a key from a ring so old it squeaked when it turned. The steel hatch gave way to a stairwell descending into a sub-basement even government blueprints probably forgot. Down there, the air was damp and metallic. Walls were lined with cables and unmarked breaker boxes. At the far end stood a thick concrete door. No label, no handle, just a black scanner panel embedded in the wall. Jason approached it. He didn't hesitate. The scanner flickered, then went green. The door hissed and rolled open. Behind it, rows of sealed containers, metal cabinets, servers humming in isolation. A lab, no windows, no connection to the outside. Hank stepped in and stopped cold. Good God, dozens of files, dozens of names, all marked with a red slash except 3: Statham, Holt 9A. Jason moved through the room like a ghost retracing a forgotten path. He opened one cabinet. Inside, photos, voice logs, drone surveillance, all about him, but twisted, altered. Missions he never took, actions he never made. A file claimed he gave orders in regions he never set foot in. It wasn't just memory manipulation, it was replication. They weren't building an archive, they were building a template. Jason's hand trembled, not out of fear but fury. Whoever was behind this didn't just want to erase his past, they wanted to overwrite it. Hank opened a drawer and froze. Jason walked over. Inside was a vial, thick glass, labeled MK Sync. Holt/bleed. Jason picked it up. The fluid shimmered silver blue. He recognized it. A compound designed for neural resonance, used in experiments that linked memories across subjects, only ever tested once, on Sarah. She'd volunteered, thinking it would bring closure to fallen soldiers, help families understand what happened in their last moments, but they'd twisted it, injected false data, buried truth under layers of manipulation. Jason crushed the vial in his fist. Hank took a step back. "What now?" Jason looked up. "We take this place down, But before he could act, a burst of static rang out from a speaker hidden in the ceiling, then a voice, cold, familiar. "I knew you'd find it, Jason." Jason's eyes narrowed. "I left breadcrumbs for you, for her. You always liked puzzles." Jason scanned the room. The voice continued. "You want the truth? Meet me where it ended, the rooftops. 15 minutes. The speaker went dead. Hank looked at Jason. "It's a trap." Jason nodded. "That's why I'm going." The rooftop of the Veterans Building was flat, gravel-strewn and exposed to the wind. The city stretched beyond it like a forest of steel. Jason stepped into the open, no weapons drawn, just his fists and a heartbeat that hadn't sped up even once. A figure stood near the edge, black coat, pale hands, same man from the interrogation room. He turned slowly. "Subject 9A, you were always the hardest to predict." Jason walked closer. "You built this, the rewrite," the man smiled. "We didn't build it, we preserved it. You were made for precision, Jason, but something broke. Guilt. Loyalty, Sarah." Jason's fists tightened. "You took her. We freed her from the weight of memory. She's not suffering anymore, she's transcending it." Jason stepped forward. "She's not your test case." "No," the man said, voice now sharp. "She's your anchor. And when we pull her under, you'll follow." Jason moved first. His fist met the man's jaw before he could blink. They crashed to the rooftop gravel, rolling. Jason didn't hold back. Years of restraint gone in seconds, but the man laughed through the blood. "You're too late." Jason pinned him. "Where is she?" The man smiled. "She's already waking up." Jason's fist stopped midair. What? Sarah's memory was never erased. It was sealed, layered. But someone broke the seal. Jason's mind raced, the vial, the neural sync logs, the overlapping files. "You used her mind to rewrite mine," he said. The man coughed blood. "We needed a mirror. Something real, something you'd believe. So we stitched your guilt to her pain and let it fester." Jason stood. The man didn't follow, just coughed again. "Go ahead, hit me, won't stop it." Jason turned away. Then froze. Someone stood near the rooftop stairwell, not security, not backup. Sarah, eyes glassy, face calm, but something was off. Jason stepped toward her slowly. "Sarah, it's me." She tilted her head, like she was trying to remember a tune just beyond reach. Jason stopped inches away. "Do you remember Berlin? The cabin? The sunrise you said looked like fire?" She blinked once, twice, then her lips parted. "I remember Fallujah." Jason's chest ached. Yes, yes, Fallujah. "You told me to leave you behind." She looked at him now, fully. "I lied," she whispered. Jason smiled through the tears in his eyes. "I know." Then she collapsed into him. No words, just breathe. And behind them sirens began to rise, real ones, security. Reinforcements. Jason turned to see Hank at the stairwell, waving frantically. "Time's up." Jason pulled Sarah close. "We're done here." Back in the maintenance tunnels, Hank drove the service cart like a man possessed. Jason held Sarah upright in the back, her body shivering under shock. "We have to get her out," Jason said. Hank didn't ask where. He just drove through corridors, out through a back entrance, into daylight. Hours later, Sarah lay on a mattress in an abandoned cabin Jason had prepped years ago, her pulse steady, her breath deep. A fire crackled in the corner. Hank stood watch near the door, crowbar still in hand. Jason sat beside her, watched her eyes flutter open. "Hey," he said quietly. She blinked. "You're here." Jason nodded. "Always." She reached for his hand. "Is it real this time?" He nodded again. And for the first time in years, Jason Statham let his guard drop. But it didn't last long, because outside, in the dark, a drone hovered, unseen, unheard. Watching, recording, and in a nearby room a screen lit up. A new file appeared, labeled Subject 9A, fully activated. Phase 2 begins. The morning light peeled through the cabin's cracked blinds like slow-moving fingers. Jason sat by the window, shirt off, wrapping gauze around a cut on his arm. Sarah still slept, but every now and then she twitched, whispering fragments of memories not meant to return. In a corner, Hank flipped through a yellowed field manual Jason had stashed under the floorboards. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. There was a storm building. Jason's jaw tensed as he caught movement in the tree line beyond the glass. Not a bird, not wind, a drone, second one today. He moved away from the window and clicked off the emergency beacon he'd set under the desk. Whoever was watching, they were already close. This cabin, like every other fallback shelter Jason had ever set up, was designed to be temporary. A place to heal, not hide. He turned to Hank. "We move at noon." Hank didn't argue. "West?" Jason nodded. "Montana line, got a contact off-grid." If she's alive, she can help. Hank exhaled slowly. We'll need fuel and gear. Jason pulled a duffel from under the bed, tossed Hank a pistol. You remember how to use that? Hank gave him a crooked grin. Son, I was training SEALs when you were still learning to walk. Jason smirked just once. Behind them, Sarah stirred. She sat up slowly, rubbing her head like the dreams had left bruises. Where are we? Jason knelt beside her, safe. For now. Her eyes scanned the room, then landed on him. It's not over, is it? Jason shook his head. Not even close. They were halfway down a gravel road when the first blast hit. A ripple tore through the trees. Then came the roar, low, mechanical, and near impossible to track. Jason slammed the brakes on the truck. Behind them, smoke rose. Not from the cabin, from the ridge above it. He turned to Hank and Sarah. Out. Now. They dove into the brush just before a second blast lit up the gravel path they'd just left. The shockwave threw dirt and gravel across the tree line. Sarah rolled behind a fallen log, heart pounding. Hank pulled her in, covering her head. Jason stayed low, scanning the sky. Not drones, too fast. Too erratic, he spotted it. A small, silent hovership, black, compact, and unlike anything used in standard military, private tech, custom. Jason cursed under his breath. Whoever had activated Phase 2 wasn't just watching now. They were hunting. Back in the truck, Jason reversed full throttle, tires spitting gravel as he tore down the back path toward an old ranger station marked on a faded map. He knew the terrain better than they did. That was his edge. He just needed 10 more minutes of surprise before they regrouped. Inside the ranger station, Jason rigged a pulse jammer using copper wire, 2 batteries, and an old radio Hank found in a cabinet. It wouldn't last long, maybe 6, 7 minutes of signal blackout, but it was enough. Sarah leaned against the wall, her face pale, knuckles white. Jason joined her. I need to ask you something. She nodded barely. When you were inside, when they had you, what do you remember? Her eyes shifted. Not much, but someone was there watching, not staff, not handlers, a civilian. He asked questions. What kind? About you, about Fallujah, about a mission I never talked about. Jason's blood ran cold. Did he say his name? Sarah hesitated. Marshall, Evan Marshall. Jason backed away slowly. He hadn't heard that name in over a decade. Evan Marshall had been part of Project Ember, a classified think tank designed to test psychological limits of elite operatives under artificial memory stress. The program was shut down after several deaths, suicides mostly, but Marshall had disappeared, and now he was back. Using Jason's own memories to rebuild a version of him that could be controlled, Jason turned to Hank. We're not running anymore. Hank raised an eyebrow. What does that mean? It means we find Marshall, and we erase him. They headed north. Jason didn't need coordinates. He remembered where Marshall's fallback facility had been built, tucked into a defunct hydroplant near the Canadian border. No air access, no GPS tags, just reinforced steel and enough paranoia to power 1,000 conspiracies. When they arrived, the gate was rusted, the locks untouched. But the power was on. That was enough to confirm it. Jason moved first, gun drawn. The interior was colder than expected. Not just temperature, atmosphere. The kind of cold that lived in places where no laughter had ever been allowed. Down a stairwell through a tunnel, they reached the main chamber, empty. Dust-covered terminals, filing cabinets. One broken projector still spinning old footage of a training exercise. Then they found the room. It wasn't large, just a table, a chair, and a massive screen displaying Jason's face. Live, behind the screen, a voice crackled over the speakers. Welcome back, Subject 9A. Jason didn't flinch. Marshall, the voice chuckled. Still pretending to be a man. Your code now. History reconstructed. Even your anger is algorithmic. Jason looked around the room. There's no signal coming out of here. You're bluffing. Oh, I'm not here, the voice replied. This is just the interface. The real Marshall's gone digital. Uploaded 2 years ago. Jason blinked once. You're an AI. Not quite. I'm the Echo, the one thing you can't kill. The screen began to shift. Video clips played, missions Jason never took, re-edited to make him look like a traitor, a killer, a rogue, false flags, manufactured proof. They were building a case, framing him. Jason stepped forward. You can play the past on loop. Doesn't make it real. Oh, but it makes the future react to it. The screen switched to a live feed, dozens of operatives being briefed, a file with Jason's name, marked, High Priority Termination. Jason stared in silence, then spoke. I'm not running anymore. No, the voice whispered. You're about to be erased. Jason stepped back, then pulled a small flash drive from his pocket, plugged it into the console. A counter-hack built by Claire weeks ago. The screen flickered, the voice faltered. What are you?" Jason turned to Hank and Sarah. "Back out. Now." They sprinted. Behind them, the facility lights began to strobe violently. The console emitted a deep hum as the program collapsed in on itself. By the time they reached daylight, smoke was already curling from the stairwell. Jason didn't smile. He knew this wasn't the end. It was the start of Phase 3, and next time the war wouldn't be in code. It'd be personal. The smoke rising from the hydroplant curled like a signal, black and defiant against the gray mountain sky. Jason Statham stood on the ridge with wind in his jacket, eyes fixed on the fire below, jaw clenched like he could bite through steel. The hard part wasn't the battle. It never was. The hard part was knowing it wasn't over. Sarah leaned against the jeep, a blanket wrapped around her shoulders. She looked better, less haunted, but whatever Echo had done to her, it left fingerprints on her soul. Some things, once fractured, never return the same. Hank stood to the side, crowbar slung across his back like it belonged there. He hadn't spoken since they left the blast zone. Jason could see it in the old man's posture. Something was boiling under the quiet. "We should move," Hank finally said. "If Echo's truly digital now, that fire's not the end, it's a reset." Jason didn't argue, he just nodded and got in the driver's seat. They drove for hours. West, then south. No digital trail, no calls, no GPS. Just maps burned into Jason's memory and silence between them that said more than words ever could. When they reached the next safe house, a farmhouse buried in a vineyard nobody tended anymore, Jason checked the perimeter twice before stepping inside. Old walls. Reinforced basement. A burner satellite uplink buried in the barn. He turned it on for 5 minutes, nothing. Then the screen lit up. A single line of text appeared. "You erased a shadow, but the man lives." Jason sat still. Sarah stood behind him, voice shaky. "Who is he really, Jason?" Jason exhaled slowly. Evan Marshall wasn't just Echo's architect, he was its first subject, Project Ember. He injected his own neural patterns into the AI to guide it. What we saw was him, a version of him, but the real Marshall, he's alive. Sarah stepped closer. Then that blast didn't finish anything. Jason looked at her. It started something else. Hank tossed his crowbar onto the table. "Then let's finish it, for real this time." Jason pulled up the only clue left in the system, a hidden file buried beneath an old Ember log, coordinates, northern Utah. Cold Zone Facility. Jason knew the place. It had been scrubbed from government maps years ago after a supposed radiation leak. But Jason had been there once, briefly. It wasn't radiation they were hiding, it was control. They arrived at night, no lights, just snow. The building looked like a concrete coffin dropped in the middle of nowhere. Flat roof, no windows. Barbed fencing curled around it like a crown of thorns. Jason led them inside. There were no guards, no alarms, just dead silence, which was worse. Down in the lower level, motion sensors lit up pale blue lights as they passed. Then they reached it. A single chamber, sealed behind a biometric wall. Jason pressed his hand to the pad. It didn't react. He reached into his jacket, pulled out a strip of synthetic fingerprint film, unrolled it across his palm, and tried again. The door hissed open. Inside stood a man, not digital, not a projection. A man, real, older than Jason remembered, but unmistakably Evan Marshall. Gray at the temples, posture proud, eyes bright with obsession. "You came." Jason stepped forward slowly. "You left the trail," Marshall nodded. "You were never meant to be erased. You were meant to evolve." Sarah stepped inside. Marshall's eyes flicked to her. "She still functions," he said, almost admiring. "The last tether, and now the catalyst." Hank walked in last, closing the door behind them. Jason's voice was ice. "What is this place?" Marshall gestured around. "The core, the original Ember server is here, fully analog, immune to imps, immune to wipes. Here we reprogram the soul and we're ready to scale." Jason moved like a thunderclap. He pinned Marshall to the wall before the man could blink. "Scale to what?" Marshall didn't flinch. "To everyone." Jason's grip tightened. "You tortured her. You used me." "I freed you," Marshall growled. "I took away your guilt, gave you something clean. You were meant to be more than memory." Jason stepped back. "You don't get to rewrite who I am." Marshall straightened his jacket. "But don't you see? You already did." The Jason Statham standing here isn't the man who left Fallujah. He's the one who came back broken and decided to bury the truth. I just made you remember it. Jason turned to Sarah. She's not part of your project anymore. Marshall laughed softly. No, she's the heart of it. She's the only one the machine couldn't break. You didn't save her. She saved you. Jason walked to the console. It was still running. Analog dials, tapes, no screens. He reached into his coat, pulled a small sphere. A thermal charge. I'm done talking. Marshall's face broke into something between rage and revelation. You'll burn the only mirror that's ever told you the truth. Jason didn't blink. I have one already. He looked at Sarah. She nodded. Jason armed the charge. Set the timer for 60 seconds. As he turned, Marshall reached for something behind the console. A syringe. Jason moved fast, but not fast enough. Marshall injected it into his own neck. His body convulsed, then went still. Jason stared. What the hell did he just? The lights shifted. The walls began to hum. Sarah looked at the console. A countdown had started, not for the bomb. For a signal, Jason grabbed her arm. Hank, get back. They sprinted down the corridor as the walls pulsed red. Marshall's body spasmed again, his veins glowing faintly under his skin. Whatever he injected, it was syncing him with the server, making him a living transmitter. By the time they hit daylight, the ground behind them shook. Then silence. No explosion, just silence. Back at the Jeep, Jason checked the sat uplink again. Nothing. Then 5 minutes later, a single message appeared. Subject 9A cleared. Project Statham begins. Jason stared at it, then looked at Sarah, then Hank. What does that mean? Hank asked. Jason didn't answer right away. He looked up at the dark, quiet sky. It means I wasn't the subject. The screen blinked again. New primary. Subject 11B. Jason's blood turned cold. He remembered the old Ember files. The one subject they never identified. Subject 11B had never completed. It was marked, awaiting host. Sarah stepped forward. Jason, they weren't after you. He turned slowly. They were after me. Her hand trembled. Behind them, somewhere in the hills, something flickered. A drone. And from deep within the burned-out compound behind them, a new file was already writing itself. This war wasn't over. It hadn't even started yet.